Welcome to episode 21 of the Spen and Nick Show. We are in the middle of the coronavirus, but we're not letting it stop us. We're still going to keep going. And actually, that's quite a nice segue to talk about what we're going to be talking about today, which is innovation in the time of coronavirus. Spencer, you've seen some interesting articles come out that you want to talk about. Go on. What are they?
So I was watching the news last night and I saw this story about loads of Formula One teams coming together to build ventilators in a super short amount of time, like really literally taking a couple of days to build and produce and manufacture thousands of ventilators that are going to help keep people alive. And what was really interesting about this story was that the normal kind of timelines in order to produce a piece of kit like this for the NHS and get it passed and approved by the NHS is like a year or longer. But they've managed to do it in just a couple of days. And it just made me think, like, how can we take innovations like this and take them to market so much quicker than we normally do? And particularly, what are those kind of conditions that we need to have in order to make innovation? We're going through some of the most difficult times that the country has seen in recent generations, but yet there are still amazing things that are happening. Is it because of the difficulties that we're having that we're coming out with these great things, or is it that we're just seeing them more? I don't know. Like, it just kind of really interested me about what's happening in the world of innovation. There's a couple of other things as well, and I know that you've talked about some of the startups that happened in the last recession. Maybe it's worth talking about some of those really big successes. And also, even if you go back hundreds of years, amazing works of art, amazing scientific discoveries have happened in some of the most troubled and difficult times that we've ever had. So why is that the case? That's the question that I want to ponder today.
I think that there are four key things that have to happen for innovation to happen rapidly. And they are, quite simply, number one, there needs to be a huge market need and market demand for it, which can be created very quickly in a crisis. Two, they need to have the operational ability to be able to set up quickly and actually create the solution. Three, they need to have government support, or at least there needs to be no restrictions in place, or there needs to be faster ways of getting the like stamps that they need of approval to be able to get it done. So, for example, with this health equipment, I'm sure that McLaren and all the other Formula One companies, I think they're also working with Siemens as well. They probably had support from the government in terms of rushing through the approvals so that they meet the standards. And then the final thing that I think they need as well is they do need to have enough cash available to them to be able to produce the solutions that they're creating. So those four things are absolutely vital for any company to work quickly, to rapidly innovate in a time of crisis. What do you think of that?
I think that's the show over, man. You just no. I mean, it's well worth digging into some of those, because it's not just important to see that these may well be the four conditions that we need to have met, but actually, what are the lessons that we can take from this in order to not only enable this to happen during a crisis period, but something that we can enable to flourish longer term as well. So why don't we pick them apart?
Well, just before you say that, like what
Yeah.
you've triggered a metaphor that I've been thinking about quite a lot recently, and this is the idea of the caterpillar. So we're all going into what's the word, quarantine?
The chrysalis.
The chrysalis.
Oh, yeah.
I like your word better. I was going to call it quarantine, but we're going into chrysalis. I'm going to have to check the dictionary after this. But I think is we can reframe the way that we're looking at the situation. And I honestly feel like a caterpillar. I feel like I'm going into my, like, staying at home in quarantine. But what I'm doing is I'm doing my very best to prepare as much as possible for a transformation that can happen. So the question that I think you can ask yourself is, how can you come out of this situation better than the position that you went into it in? Yeah. So
Okay, so I've literally got a picture of you now developing amazing, beautiful butterfly wings and kind of flying off into the gorgeous blue sky sunshine day and just having the most amazing time for maybe just a couple of days, but it definitely
And
happened.
why not? Why not? I know that it's a very serious situation. We shouldn't make light of that too much. because there are really bad things that are happening. People are losing their jobs. People's businesses are collapsing. However, we do need to acknowledge that and be aware of it, and give that the recognition that it is really serious. But at the same time, I think we shouldn't give it over recognition and not focus too much on the negative. We need to focus on the positive in these situations and look for ways to grow. Because if we're stressed, the mind can't look for opportunities to spot ways of connecting the dots and being innovative. So if we can be kind of relaxed and we can kind of reframe that, I think that's going to be really good. And this metaphor of the being a caterpillar and then turning into a butterfly, and we're going through this kind of phase of transformation, I think that's really, really important. So, but to bring that back, to your point, you were saying we were going to talk about what we're going to talk about. Sorry, before I just went on that monologue.
No, I like the monologue. I'm very happy to carry on with that transition. And that line of conversation, or we can come back and kind of break apart a little bit those four different conditions for innovation.
Let's break them up.
One thing, okay, let's break them up and then maybe come back full circle. This is going to be a meandering podcast version rather than some of our very kind of clinical 10 things shows. So let's start with that. Need the fact that there has to be a big market, and I think in this situation it's even bigger. It's not just about having a big market, it's having like a responsibility and an imperative that means it's literally a life or death situation. You know, I've often heard people comparing this situation to what it might have been like during the war. It's the most recent massive crisis that we've had across, globally, internationally. And the story that's so often talked about during the war is about people coming together for the good of everyone, really kind of pulling together resources, and having this imperative that means you have to survive, and pulling out all the stops in order to survive. So it's not just in this instance having that kind of market need. It's like it's a life or death situation, which is going to, of course, ramp up the importance. It's going to ramp up the focus, and it's going to ramp up people's ability to do the seemingly impossible, I think. So yeah, I totally get that. Any other expansion that you want to give on that one?
I think, typically what we call it is, which I hate this terminology, is a burning platform. So it's this kind of like corporate speak that doesn't really mean anything, but you need to have a real need that people are willing to act on straight away. And so crisis creates that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Number 2, though, was operational feasibility is next. You need to be able to actually produce the solutions. And that's why we're seeing a lot of these major, large manufacturers and engineering companies like Dyson, like Siemens, like the Formula One companies, like GA, like Tesla, all producing these solutions very, very quickly because they've got the factories that are and the design capabilities to be able to produce this quickly and at mass scale.
Yeah, there's another one that I want to add in here, or I think it's maybe a sub point into this, is that I personally believe that when you bring together people from different specialist areas, that actually you can create some more innovative solutions. So there's been some really good examples in the past of where people who are super specialist on one thing trying to go and solve this specific problem, and they just can't do it. They hit some barriers possibly because they're looking through the eyes of what they know and what they're so familiar with, and they're not looking outside into different tangential or oblique kind of routes to solving that specific problem. So when you've got people that are coming from lots of different areas working together, then there's a bigger chance of coming up with some new innovative solutions. And that might be innovative solutions for the ventilator itself, or it might be innovative solutions for speed of manufacture or speed of getting things through kind of regulators and being approved, in this case by the NHS, those, etc. So I think there's this real a real amazing power when you get a range of people, and it's this kind of argument of specialists versus more generalists. Often when you've got people that are coming from different directions, you come out with very different solutions than you would do if you just have have that kind of monoculture without the diversity.
Absolutely. I think that's such a good point. And that leads nicely onto the third point. You've kind of actually covered it a lot. Is that idea of kind of certification and approvals. And so if you've got expertise in that and you've got the approvers working with the manufacturers, really trying to get the outcome together, then we can speed up the process massively. It'd be what tends to happen, I think, is that everyone's worried about the lawyers getting involved, and so that is a massive inhibitor to innovation happening quickly.
Yeah, and you said something just before we started recording about the lawyers. I don't know whether you wanted to repeat that live or not.
Live on the recording.
Live on the recording.
Live on on this recording. So I do believe that the reason why innovation doesn't happen across the world is a huge part of it is because of lawyers. Lawyers put the brakes on a lot of things. I think they've lost themselves. Lawyers are there to support everybody in society and make sure that we adhere to the rules, and that if we don't, punishment happens, and that people can be compensated for anything that does happen to them that should not have happened to them. So that is great, but I think they've lost themselves. They have become this group of people that quite monocultural, and they charge crazy fees. Like it's just it cripples people and businesses. And also they take ages to do anything. Their systems are old. A lot of them are old, and they're not innovating fast enough to support new businesses and other parts of society that are innovating more quickly. So lawyers kill innovation, and that's one reason why we're not able to move forward. That's just my thoughts on that.
There you go. There you go. Lawyers kill. I mean, all I heard was lawyers kill innovation. And, if lawyers kill innovation, that's not what we need in this world right now.
We don't need that, because just think of it as a startup.
We've
done it. I've done it before. You've done it before. You're trying to start a business. You're trying to do something new. And then, you've got to create T's and C's, or you've got to make a contract. And you're like, oh, man. And then,
and everything just grinds to a halt.
Just grinds to a halt.
Yeah. They become the single bottleneck, and it's infuriating. It slows down. It literally kills off projects. It probably kills off companies, and it means that things like ventilators that are so in need take a year or 18 months under normal conditions in order to get out into the market, which is just an awful state of affairs. I'm gonna throw in a slight curveball here, because sometimes we like to do this. We've been talking a little bit about this idea of kind of monocultures, of non-diverse groups of people that are problematic because they inhibit innovation. Maybe they stop progress being made quite often. And in the world that we've had, it's been less talked about very recently, but over the last couple of years we've talked about diversity a huge amount. And often we talk about diversity in terms of race and colour and gender. And all those kind of benchmarkable and obvious signs of diversity. And one of the things that I think is emerging more recently is this idea of cognitive diversity, of differences with the way that people think. And I heard a really good podcast yesterday that was talking about cognitive diversity as being the thing that you should aim for, and by doing that you will end up hitting all of those targets for other aspects of diversity. Because if you've got people that are thinking differently, there's a really good chance that they've come from a different place, they've got a different heritage, they've got a different they're a different gender, or whatever it is. And so I really like this idea of cognitive diversity first. And there's something that's been going on in my mind for a while is, if we can have different people with different cognitive traits that come from different perspectives, and that a group of people can be diverse. I'm kind of interested, and this is, I'm throwing this out there. I'm really not sure that it's a valid argument, but people that have a range of different skills, people that are more empathetic, people that can change the way that they are with different people. Like, for example, I take on some people's traits when I'm talking to them. I find myself that could speak slightly differently to different groups of people. I
You
kind of
mirror
very
them.
different. I mirror them quite a lot. And I wonder whether these kind of things actually are very positive in terms of bringing that diversity of self to the table. So I think that you can be quite a diverse person and having lots of different frames of reference, lots of different perceptions on things. And I wonder whether there is some kind of idea of like diversity of self. I don't know. I'm throwing it out there. I've got no idea whether you've got any opinion on that, but it's kind of an interesting point that I'd like to explore more at some point.
Yeah, no, I think this is a really good thing to discuss. Part of it, I think, what happens is that we've got so many versions of ourselves and we're constantly changing and transforming. But what does happen is we have habits or habitual ways of doing things. And what that means is that we fall into our comfortable selves. But is that self that we are more often the one who we really want to be? Is it the one that's actually contributing to who we want to be in the future? Or where we want to go? Because if it's not, then it's something we should be considering about, like, how are we thinking, how are we feeling, how are we behaving? And these are things that we should be constantly questioning so that we can be more aligned with who we want to be. And I think that works going back with this whole innovation thing as well, because as a society and with the businesses within it, what do we believe? Like, how do we feel as individuals in these organizations, and what action are we currently taking? I think that actually we're more aligned than ever in business now, that you've got these companies that, you know, normally have to do everything for their stakeholders are now doing things for the greater good. So this shows that it is possible, even within the structures that we've created. And so, like, as you're seeing, even companies have got these multiple personalities. That's a powerful thing. And I think the more that we embrace this diversity and also create a freedom to switch between selves and not put people in boxes or companies in boxes can be very powerful, particularly in times of change and crisis like now.
Amazing. I think that's really well summed up. So we've talked about the first three of these. So remind me of what number 4 is for the
Cash, baby.
Cash. Of course it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we talked about cash on the last episode being one of those things that people need to get through a crisis. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Does that need any more explanation? Cash is king, right now.
Cash is king. If you haven't got any money, it's very difficult to actually make any changes out there, right?
Absolutely, yeah. Not a lot more needs to be said about the cash point, right?
I think we're good. And I think that, so from this whole episode, what are we summarising? What are the key takeaways, Spencer?
So I want to go through those 4 again, but I want to do it specifically so that we can take action for the future. Because it's great that these things are happening during these crisis periods. This is really where that need has come from. But how can we learn and how can we sustain these kind of changes, these positive changes that we're taking now? So let's go through them again as a quick recap. Number 1 is that you need to have that market need. And that means that everyone's got to understand that the world can be actually we have the power to create the world that we want to see, right? And I think that's a really important thing, that we're seeing all of these changes now. I believe, maybe it's my cynical side, but I believe that the muscle memory that we've got, the kind of mental model of the regression to the mean means that we'll very quickly go back to business as usual as it was before the crisis. But I'm really hopeful that humans can overcome those barriers and those difficulties and actually carry on with some of these really positive traits. So how can we identify? I personally believe that this is an imperative that we've got to do. We've got to have this change, this widespread behavior change that we're starting to see. People being much kinder to each other, people being more considerate of others, people driving forward with their hopes and their dreams and their ambitions, not just for personal profit and gain or business profit and gain, but because it's going to impact the greater society for good. That's a need. That's something that we've got to carry on doing.
Definitely. And I think to make it so it's really tangible, you've got to have a really good idea who your customer is, and what their needs are, specifically on a day-to-day level. And typically at the moment, we're seeing that these needs are very big and very immediate and very pressing and need to be solved now. That's great if you can find a customer that has that type of need. It's not always that easy. It can also be, and this is slightly different now, but it can be that a customer might have had the need for quite a long time, but it's been a slow burner. So for example, I had quite a few keys in my pocket every day, and it was just really annoying. And I had that constantly. Was thinking about it every time I pulled my keys out to put the key in the door, door lock. It annoyed me. Then what I did was I saw this Orbit key, and what it does is it puts all your keys in a really nice pack together that you've got there ready, and that it's really easy to just kind of get out of your pocket and just put it straight in the door. It doesn't jangle in your pocket. Super nice, super tidy. And that was like 30 quid, mate, 35 quid or something. But I'd had that need for quite a long time, and it was a slow burner, and it solved it, and now I couldn't be happier. So
There you go.
it's not just about having large burning immediate needs, it's also about having slow burning kind of ebbing needs that you can work on. So that's interesting to think about. What are those for your customers?
Really good one. What that reminds me of is coming back to jobs to be done. And one belief, one version of jobs to be done is that every need has been met in some way. What you just described there isn't necessarily an unmet need. It's that you haven't got the best and optimal solution for your needs. So you've got jangling keys, you've got a key fob, and it's annoying in your pocket. You sit on your key and it spikes into your ass sometimes. Those are problems, but it's not unmet. It's not an unmet need. You've solved it in some kind of way because you've got a thing that's holding your keys together. But this solution is a 10x version of what you had before, and it's
Massively
actually
superior.
solving some of those things. Massively superior. Okay, so that's awesome. Find those unmet needs. So find the needs. Find the ways that you can get the 10x. Really investigate some of those pain points and problems. On the second one, you've got to have the infrastructure and the ability to create. Right. And I think this is a really important thing, not just for large scale manufacture like we've been talking about just now with Formula One teams, but actually the ability to create is it's a human gift that we have. We're the only species on the planet that can create stuff, from nothing and create the amazing things of diverse stuff that we've been able to do. Let's use that gift in order to create stuff, anything, whether that be websites and digital stuff, whether it be hardware, whether it be stuff in big manufacturing labs, whether that be, comic books. My daughter's creating a comic book at the moment because she got inspired by a film that she watched. Creating stuff is so important, and once you build up that ability to create and to build, then it only gets bigger and bigger and better, and that practice is a really important thing.
Next up, I'd say make friends with the authority or the person that authorizes the products. Just reach out to them, call them, or email them, find out how you can connect with them so that you can get them involved in the process if it's relevant to what you're building.
I think that's really good. I think, and frame it in a way that shows that you're trying to work with them directly. You're not in opposition. You want to be working with. So when you're reaching out to these people, whether they be a key stakeholder in an organization or a regulator or a lawyer, you ask them, what can I do to help you push this through quicker? What can I do to make your job as a regulator, your job as a key stakeholder, your job as someone who has to report upwards through a hierarchical management system? What can I do to make your job better and easier so that we can get this through quicker? I think that's a really nice way of framing something like that.
Very good. Yeah, I like that. Because I was talking more about the authorization in terms of like a regulator. But yeah, I like the way that you're bringing it into talking about like maybe if you're selling a B2B product, like getting everyone involved in the business on the other side. That's a really good idea, Spencer. I like that.
Nice. Thanks, man.
And finally, we talked about cash. I think this idea of always having stuff saved or finding ways to generate cash and have a little bit aside, that can be really powerful for times like this.
Yeah, again, I just don't think much else needs to be said on this one. Cash is so important. I'm seeing it constantly in the work that I'm doing in the business that I'm running. Without cash, you can't operate. It's as simple as that. And take the opportunities to get the cash. Look for ways to continue to be sustainable with your generation of revenue as well. I think, yeah,
Definitely
so
look at
important.
ways for saving it, but I'd say that that's limited, whereas it's finite. Whereas if you can increase sales, that's infinite. So if you can increase your sales, find ways to do that. I've said it quite a few times before on the podcast. Call up all your existing and previous clients, ask them how they're doing, and see if you can start a conversation. There might be a way that you can help them that can be mutually beneficial.
Mate, that's awesome. I think we've given some interesting tips. We've talked about a really fascinating area. I hope that as we saw in the 2008 financial crisis, where some of the biggest and best and most well-known companies were created. Who have we got on that list, by the way? Some of the top 10. We've got what?
Who have we got on the list? We've got Groupon, Instagram, Uber, Pinterest, Slack, and even Google Ventures, among others.
Amazing. So some of the biggest and most well-known companies in the world created through the most troubled and difficult times, especially for a startup in some ways founding. I think there's some real good lessons that we can take from that about resilience, about battling, about frugality, about looking for resourcefulness, looking for ways of doing things. So hopefully during this crisis, some amazing things will happen, and we'll get some of the next biggest companies starting right now in this year.
Definitely.
And
If
go on.
Yeah, shall I wrap it up? Can I wrap this one up?
I think you should wrap it up. You do such a good job of it.
So if you like this episode, we'd really appreciate it if you could help us out and subscribe to the YouTube channel, or if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, if you could follow the podcast, that would be really amazing. So please do that now. I'd like to leave you with this: be the caterpillar. Prepare yourself, hungrily eat away so that you're ready to transform and turn into that butterfly as soon as we get out of this situation.
There you go.
Until next time, cheers.
Cheers. Be the caterpillar.